right, first of all, how many people got to try the wonderful Nespresso coffee? Woo! And if you'll notice, there were 4 different origins. One is Costa Rica, which Alfonso was kind enough to include because he and I were there looking at the sustainable farms at origin and all the great work that's being done there by Nespresso. I want to thank Phil Wahba, who's come to, as part of the lovely sponsorship that Fortune is providing for this, to interview Alfonso. And I also wanted to introduce Alfonso myself personally because I've been working with Nespresso for 20 years when I was running Rainforest Alliance, and since then running the Center for Sustainable Business. And Nespresso has worked with 180,000 small farmers all over the world. They know every farm and their performance on sustainability. They've been investing in partnerships with Rainforest Alliance, Fair Trade, IUCN, Aluminum Recycling Coalition, et cetera, but most importantly, really focused on the livelihoods and work with the farmers. And it's just been such a great honor to get to know Alfonso and the sort of commitment that the full Nespresso team has behind them. I'm also just going to give a little commercial, which is his boss, Guillaume Lecomte, who is on my advisory board and the CEO of Nespresso globally. He actually, when he was on working with us when I first was starting CSB, he said, why don't you do executive education? And I'll step up, and I want my managers to go to the field every year. And so every year, and last time Alfonso came with me, we take Nespresso managers to the field to look at conventional versus sustainable coffee farms so they can see and understand what's actually happening. And the only other point I'm going to raise there for all of you who are corporates or investors, I find over and over and over again that corporates never go see the origin of what's being produced in their value chains. So they don't have the personal understanding of the love, sweat, and tears that the producers put into it, or the suppliers, whoever it is, or all the environmental challenges that they have. And so when you meet a company who wants to educate their employees, it's just brilliant. And I very much hope that all of you, whether it's with me, of course, I'm perfect and it's wonderful and you should work with us at NYU, but if you find any other avenue for bringing your people to understand these issues at a very visceral and emotional level, it's really important. It changes things in a big way. So I want to thank Nespresso for their coffee, but most importantly for their commitment to their farmers and the sustainability of their supply chain. And I, again, don't normally make an advertising around this, but it's just been such a pleasure for me to work with this company. Really see, I mean, I've been to so many Nespresso farms all over the world, and it's just amazing and inspiring. So without further ado, Phil, have I made your job harder or easier? Okay, good. All right, without further ado, let me turn it over to Phil, and thank you.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much, Shenzi. And I'm a little under-caffeinated because the lines were very long to get the Nespresso, so I'll catch you up later. So thank you very much, Alfonso, for joining us. So I'll just set the scene, and then we'll start with the Q&A. So just a few facts about Nespresso. It's a wholly owned unit of Nestle. Your global sales are about 6 billion-ish. 14 billion pods sold every year-ish. Yeah. Half of which were in NYU this morning, but you're a B corporation, and we can get back to that. And I will confess, when NYU approached me about this, doing an interview with you, it was like disposable pods. That doesn't sound like the most sustainable product in our household. But as I did research, it was interesting to learn about a lot of the initiatives that you and goals that you have to reduce your footprint. So some of them are a goal to have 50% of your pods be recyclable by 2025. Does that still hold?
Yes, that's globally, yeah.
2025 is in 9.5 months. Just reminding you.
And it lasts a year more, right?
Yeah, time flies at our age. But anyway, home capsules are made of 80% recycled aluminum?
80% recycled aluminum.
Great. You are testing home pods in France and Switzerland that are compostable?
Home compostable paper pods we launched last year in France and Switzerland, and hoping to expand as well as we move forward.
Okay. And here in New York City, the center of the universe, and Tenzi, I'm New Yorker by adoption, not by birth, but I have absorbed the parochialism and nationalism of New Yorkers as my own. From Montreal, though. And it has worked. With the City of New York, you've worked on a project to enable aluminum recycling. And we all know that New York City recycling leaves a lot to be desired. So this is really good that you're working on something like that.
Thank you, Phil.
So let's dive right in. Debunk what I said before about my impression that capsules, a product that can really be sustainable if you put your mind to it. So, from a big picture view, debunk this idea that I had or may still have.
Okay, so we start smooth.
Yeah.
Look, usually when I talk to people, I just talked to Phil. I had several people approach me back there, and when they think about Nespresso, they think about single serve, they think about capsules, they think about waste, right? Or they don't know we have a recycling program. No, I heard that a lot, which is just gives me the honors that we have to do better in that perspective, and we know we always have to do better. But what I would tell you is, and maybe I'll jump a little bit forward, when you do a life cycle assessment of where, let's say, the footprint of an espresso cup of coffee lies, I would say that the average consumer would tell you the issue is in the capsules, right? But that's a small part. When you talk about packaging production and end of life, don't quote me on this, but it's about, 10 to 15%. The biggest footprint is at farm level, and I'll be very happy to talk to you about what we do at farm level. So not only that, when you get into it, if you take what the LCA shows us is a cup of Nespresso from farm, from tree to cup to second life has a lower carbon footprint than your regular cup of coffee. And that's something that people find hard to believe. The reason is not only because the biggest impact is at farm level, and that's where we do sustainable reduction of our emissions with our AAA program. But the second one is that when you look, and I'm sorry, this is going to be a long answer, but this is a hot topic. When you look at single serve, because that's the first thing that came to your mind, we like to view it as precision consumption. When you talk about precision consumption, you're talking about that our machines, our systems, and our capsules, you utilize the right amount of coffee, the right amount of water, and the right amount of energy, and then they switch off, that you need for a cup of coffee. There's people that say that the biggest US consumer of coffee is the kitchen sink, right? You take your average pot of coffee, you put coffee, you don't extract it as much as you can extract the beauty of what coffee has within. You maybe utilize too much water, you're reheating it, so you're wasting energy, and finally, the unused burnt coffee goes into the kitchen sink. That doesn't happen with our system. And then I get into recycling. All of our capsules are made with already 80% recycled aluminum. Why we utilize aluminum is because aluminum is infinitely recyclable. It's the best barrier that you can have versus the enemies of coffee, which are oxygen and light. The moment you have your coffee and it's exposed to light, it starts degrading. And we pride ourselves on providing the freshest, highest quality coffee that you can get at home and out of home as well. So that's why we use aluminum. So it is infinitely recyclable. The challenge that we have is that you need to recycle this aluminum, right? And there's different countries, but when you look at the US, you don't have the recycling infrastructure to recycle small particle aluminum. So we have invested heavily for years in the US to have a recycling capacity where today more than 90% of consumers have access to recycling for aluminum capsules. And the way we do it, you can go and you can take your bag, your coffee capsules, and you can drop them off at one of our boutiques. That's not much. But more importantly, we've partnered with UPS, and you can go to any UPS location, drop your capsule off there. There's other retail locations where you can put it, or you can even email you can send through mail your capsules. And what will happen with your capsules is that they will go into facilities that we have as well partnered with and invested on, and they will be recycled. Aluminum will be separated from the coffee grounds. Aluminum will be revalorized and utilized for a second life. And coffee will be revalorized and utilized usually for compost, mostly for compost, but sometimes for biofuel. So that's just an example of what. So when that happens, an espresso cup has a lower impact than a regular cup of coffee.
When you talked about pouring half of a thing of coffee into the sink. I felt a little attacked, but I forgive you for that. So I'll ask you a few questions specifically about your initiatives, but since this is a business school and I'm a business reporter, I do want to ask, it ties into what Alan and Mr. Edelman were saying earlier this morning. I get so many pitches about how great each company out there is doing on sustainability and this initiative and that. I mean, based on my inbox, you would think that our environmental problems were solved, right? Hallelujah, right? And we're in greater trouble than we were 5 years ago, right, when I started to pay attention to this. So can you tell this business audience, how does a company build credibility with the public that keeps hearing beautiful things? I mean, I don't want to pick on anybody by name, so I won't, but a few years ago, a large coffee chain got a lot of kudos for saying that they would eliminate straws in 4 years. Like, that's just one tiny thing that was also 4 years out in the future. And you know, and so then if that company then falls short in other things or they tout something else, they might not get as much credibility. So, I mean, I think it's important, or, you know, a running shoe company saying, oh, we use plastics from the ocean, and it's for basically 1,000 pairs that they sold compared to the millions that they make a year. So what's your advice for this business crowd to maintain credibility with the public on the environmental issues?
Well, this is a difficult one. Look, for years, I mean, sustainability is not new to Nespresso. I think it is in the DNA. It is embedded in our strategy. We've been doing it for more than 30 years. We've been quite silent about it. No? Tansy, every time I meet her, will reel me on this. But the reality is, if I think how you can maintain credibility, I would say, on one hand, is communicate, and that's one of our biggest challenges. No, the fact that today a large audience, from what I heard, had no idea that we have even forget about why we use single serve, etc. That we have a recycling scheme. No. I mean, I think you spoke about it. We even have to get better at it because, for example, in New York, we established curbside recycling, right? So you can just drop it in your recycling bin, and it will get recycled. So speaking better, messaging better, and I love the session of this morning of how to get better at messaging. What are relevant messages for you? That, I think that's one. Second one is transparency and measurement, right? So again, we've gotten better, and I think we still have a long ways to go in terms of measuring the impact that we have and the gaps that we have. But I think measurement and transparency with the public. I would tell you that potentially 10 years ago, if somebody asked me, is like, what is your recycling rate in the US? I wouldn't know if I would tell you, right? Today I can openly tell you it's 36%, and we have to do better. You have access to 90% of recycling, but today we recycle, as a US population, 36% of the capsules, and we have to do better. Right? So I think transparency, communication is key. The other one as well is we have many programs that we certify ourselves. I mean, if we talk about AAA program that I can speak later about, that's something that we did together with the Rainforest Alliance, but it's our own program, right? I think as we're third-party certification, I mean, I saw a little bit of what certification brings or not. I do think it's valuable, right? And having those partnerships, because we really, I mean, one of the core beliefs that we have is it's such a broad subject, sustainability is such a complex subject, we cannot do it alone, right? So the partnerships that we form, and having those partners speak on behalf of you because they believe in what you're doing together, that drives a lot of credibility.
So let's talk a little bit about your coffee beans. Obviously, you have a certain standard of quality that you need in your coffee beans, but that sounds like it also could, in theory, lead to waste from what is grown and produced. So tell us a little bit about how you work with farmers to make sure that a greater percentage of what they produce is usable and sustainable.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's a great question. This is one of the ones I'm more passionate about. So what we do at farm level and why we do it, I think is first important. No? We believe that in order for us to continue giving our consumers the highest quality coffee for years to come, the only way to do it is through a sustainable approach to business. To coffee sourcing, but not only to the coffee sourcing, across our value chain. And that's why we do it. So we do it, you could argue, we do it for a selfish reasons, for a business reason. So 20 years ago, and Tansy spoke about it, we established our AAA program in partnership with Rainforest Alliance. And basically, this program is a sustainable sourcing of high-quality coffee program that focuses on high quality, productivity, but as well it focuses on having a positive impact on farmers' livelihoods, on their communities, and on the environment. So those are the things that our AAA program covered. And 20 years ago, we started with 300 farmers, so working with them, buying directly from them, paying price premiums to them in Costa Rica. Today, we source directly from more than 150,000 farmers in 18 countries. And we pay a price premium to them for the coffee that fits our quality. The rest does not go to waste, because then they can choose to sell the coffee to us or to anybody else, but the coffee that does not meet their standards usually will be still a very high standard, because the agricultural practices that we work with them, we have 640 agronomists on the ground that go around and they give training, sustainable agricultural practices in order to improve their yields, in order to improve their outputs, in order to become more resistant versus climate change situations. So already their coffee will be high quality in general. So you could say that coffee does not go to waste, right? So this is what we do. We pay price premium to it, so really improving the livelihood. We do a lot much more as well behind the AAA program in terms of diversifying income, in terms of other programs that I can speak about. And today, I'm very proud to say that 93% of all the coffee that we buy, we purchase it directly from those 150+ thousand farmers.
So a question that occurred to me and was reinforced when our friends from Constellation Brands were on a panel earlier, and the water issue in California. Climate change, it's really wreaking havoc for anything that's to do with agriculture. How is it affecting the dependability of your sourcing and your productivity?
Well, look, coffee is a demanding plant, but as well it can be very effective. It's one of the crops that is being affected by climate change, and you see it with our farmers. They're suffering from this, right? I would say that the two biggest effects that they have, apart from climate change as well, is market fluctuating prices. But when you look at climate change, they see it, whether it's too high weathers, whether it's too much rain, too little rain. That affects their crops, it affects their yields, it can wipe out completely their crops. It affects coffee blossoms. So it really affects those effects in terms of when you do your harvest. It can exacerbate pests, right? So this is where we come in, and the way we work with them is through our AAA program. And what we want to do what we want to evolve is not only from sustainable farming practices, we want to evolve into regenerative agricultural practices, that are nature-based, that use the power of nature, that have a lower carbon impact, but still bring profitability to the farmers, And things like, so there's a lot of focus now on soil health, right, and soil recovery. We have a huge agroforestry program. It's not to plant trees for the sake of sequestering carbon. We do it in our coffee fields. Think about a coffee field. Usually, a coffee field traditionally is wiped out. It's just coffee plants. You look at the soil, it's exposed. That's not the way coffee used to be grown, and that's not the way it should be grown, because I was in a farm in Colombia, I remember, and one of our farmers was showing me a non-AAA farm. There had been heavy rains, and there were landslides, and they wiped away part of the farms next to them. Because this farmer had implemented agroforestry practices, planted trees. Not only does it help biodiversity, it brings back soil health as well. It improves the quality of coffee, actually. But having trees planted, having soil coverage, reduces the effect of that, let's say, too much rain, and reduces the effect of losing the entirety of their crops, as an example. So these are the type of things that we work with farms. Another thing another thing that I really like is we as well experiment, and sometimes this is not what we do directly. We act as conveners with our partners. We experimented in Colombia a few years back on a crop insurance program, knowing that one of the biggest issues with farmers is that you lose your crop, you lose your livelihood for the year, or potentially for more than a year. So we started to experiment with crop insurance program. So we partnered with an insurance company and with the Colombian government, where we have good relations. And what we did is, part of the price premiums that they pay, what we did is we established a satellite, sort of a satellite program that takes into account weather patterns at farm level. It analyzes history of how that has affected weather patterns, And if you're investing behind that crop insurance program, it will give you a direct payout if your farm was affected by crops. So those are the things that are lacking in the industry, where we're experimenting as well, more as conveners of this, but things that we started to roll out. You already have thousands of farmers benefiting this from Colombia, and hopefully we'll find ways to do it in other countries.
So in a couple of minutes, I'll solicit questions from the group, but for now, I'll hog the mic. If this has to do with, you guys have pretty lofty goals, eliminating gas house emissions by 2035. And I guess my question is, can you really do it alone? I mean, last year I wrote a story about airlines and their sustainable fuel initiatives, and it seemed like one airline was like, well, we're going to do it just a little bit, and it'd be like 1%, and be like, it was almost as if there was this unknown dialogue. No, you first, United. No, you first, Delta. No, you first, Southwest. And so I wonder, first of all, do you need to work with your rivals to reach, or how can you work with your rivals to facilitate you all collectively hitting these goals? And is there also a role for regulators, or would you rather just do it yourselves?
No. Look, I think in certain instances, being prime mover is important, right? Getting a little bit the learnings. And prime mover doesn't mean we're doing it alone, right? When we talk about our sustainability advisory boards, we have academics like Tensi, we have Rainforest Alliance, we have Fair Trade, we have Pure Project, we have the Colombian Federation of Coffee. We have a lot of organizations, government academic organization, NGO partners that really basically guide us, educate us, help us analyze those impact areas, and we go to it. No? Now, if collective action with other coffee producers is the way to go, that is something that completely we're not against, and that will push as we go. An excellent example I'll tell you is, for example, capsule recycling. One of our biggest markets, oldest markets, is in Europe, no? France, Switzerland, etc. There you can see that the collective action that we did, where established a recycling scheme, was a competitive advantage for us, right? Competition didn't have it. But as we move forward, we understood that in order to benefit and really have a positive impact, you have to do coalitions. So today you have recycling schemes where there's a high penetration of single-serve aluminum capsules. We're in complete coalition with all of our competitive sets, so definitely that is a way to go.
I want to, last question before I hand it over to the audience for a couple. The conference's title, How Sustainability Can Create Enterprise Value, and obviously, I mean, you're a unit of a large publicly traded company, but can sustainability really increase valuations for companies? It seems like it creates new obligations, it creates new frictions. Like what's the, there's a pushback on ESG. So if you had to summarize why is being green good for the overall value of the company, what would it be?
Wow. That's a great question, Phil. I would say, look, first, it's the right thing to do. And if it's embedded in your strategy, which it is in our strategy, you don't think about it as a cost. You don't have sustainability sitting on the side, and then you have your strategic way of going to business, going to market, and handling your end-to-end value chain. So it is embedded in the business. And it creates value. It creates value in the long term. So I spoke about that's the only way we're going to be able to procure and delight our consumers with high-quality coffee for years to come. But not only does it create value, it creates value as well, not only from a consumer perspective, but it creates value on the short term. On the short term, we spoke about Gen Z, we spoke about loyalty. We see it reflected in ourselves. The fact that we have a responsible approach to business, in many instances, not in all instances, has a positive effect on ourselves. The fact that we are able to talk about who we partner with, the other types of partners, have that certification and has a value to ourselves, right? Has a value to the loyalty of our customers. Now, our customers want to know not only what we do, they need proof points of how we do it, no? I mean, it's like when we talk about recycling, for those people who know that you're recycling, there's always a question of, well, is it true, right? What happens to the capsule at the end? And that's at the end of life. Now you're telling me you recycle, but do you really recycle? And that's where the challenges lie. But we see value creation not only from a long-term perspective, we see it immediately from a short-term perspective, and that's why we're bold in terms of our objectives, but as well we're bold in terms of the investments that we do behind sustainability.
Yeah, and clearly consumers want that. I mean, I don't know about you all, but I'm sometimes a little tired of buying a new sweater or buying a plane ticket and feeling guilty about it. I mean, it'd be really nice to be, consume happily without worrying that I'm destroying everything for the next generation. Because as we saw this morning, we'll hear from them, right? So anyway, are there anybody in the audience have a couple of questions? I can run my mouth off for the next 2 to 3 minutes otherwise. Over there.
Thank you. My name's Kendall. I'm an executive in residence with the CSB. And Phil, thank you for asking the question about cooperation with competitors to promote the sector, or the category, if you will, of sustainability. But since you've already answered that, let me go back to something you mentioned at the outset. What's it mean to be a B Corporation?
I love that question. Look, 2 years ago, we got a B Corp certification, no? A company the size of Nespresso at a global level. And certification is great, but for us, it's not a means to an end. For us, on one side, it's a proud recognition of the work we've done for the past 30 years, in one side. But on the other one, what is really important, well, the certification, because you'll have it in your boutique doors, you'll have it potentially in your packaging, that can benefit from a consumer perspective. But what B Corp certification does, I think, is 2 things that I really value. One, it puts you in the league, in contact, and we've enabled already partnerships with that, with I think it's more than 4,500 like-minded businesses. So there are partnership opportunities already there. But the biggest one, when you go through that very rigorous process together with B-Lab, you learn where you're good and you learn where you're bad. You learn where you really have to improve. And we're up for a second recertification. It's every 3 years, next year. And believe me, thanks to that, we've uncovered areas that potentially we were not considering, we were not focusing on, and now we are focusing on, not for the sake of recertification, which yes, we want to, we want that, right? But for the sake of, we know this eventually is good for business, and again, this is something that we have to continue to do. But it is a value, it's sort of a footprint of where to improve in areas that potentially, if you didn't go through that process, you wouldn't be able, or you wouldn't be tackling those issues.
Okay, and in the last minute we have, just a quick question for you. Nespresso is part of Nestle, which of course, how independent are you from them in terms of setting your own environmental, goals? But also, Nestle is not always seen as the greatest sustainability citizen. Does that ever spill over onto you guys, your reputation, do you think?
At the end of the day, yes, we are part of the Nestle organization, proud to be part of the Nestle organization. We are a globally managed business, so that gives us a certain independence. We do set our own sustainability goals. What I think is beautiful is we learn from sustainability initiatives that our parent company is doing, and our parent company learns from sustainability initiatives and programs that we're doing as well. So that would be my best answer to that.
Well, thank you for joining us, Alfonso, and just warning you all, at the next coffee break, stay out of my way, because I really need coffee. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.